What if the very warriors sworn to defend humanity carry the tainted blood of those who once tried to destroy it? The chamber is sealed. No records exist of this meeting. In the depths of Terra, beneath layers of adamantium and stone older than human memory, 3 figures stand in silence. An inquisitor, a representative of the Adeptus Mechanicus, and a withered librarian, his armor bearing no chapter markings, no heraldry, no identity. They speak of gene seed, they speak of purity, but mostly they speak of lies, of secrets buried so deep that even the God Emperor's light cannot reach them. Because somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, Space Marine chapters wage war in his name, bearing gene seed that should not exist. Gene seed taken from the traitors, from the damned. The Imperium tells a simple story. After the Horus Heresy tore the galaxy apart, after half the Emperor's sons turned to chaos and nearly destroyed everything humanity had built, the survivors did what they had to do. They took the gene seed of the Loyalist legions, the pure strains from Gilliman, Dorn, the Khan, and others who remained true, and they founded new chapters. 20 successor chapters from each loyal legion during the second founding, then hundreds more over the millennia that followed. A brotherhood of warriors, all tracing their lineage back to proven loyalty, back to those who stood firm when the galaxy burned. But what they don't tell you, what is whispered only in the most secure vaults of the Inquisition, is that gene seed is precious. Dangerously precious. When legions numbered in the hundreds of thousands, when the Great Crusade pushed into every corner of the galaxy, the Imperium had gene seed reserves that would make a High Lord weep with envy. And when the heresy came, when brother fought brother across 1,000 worlds, much of that precious resource was lost, destroyed, or worse, corrupted. The Loyalists won, but they won at terrible cost. Gene seed from Ferrus Manus's legion was nearly extinct. The Salamanders were reduced to a fraction of their strength. Even the mighty Ultramarines, who would become the genetic backbone of countless chapters, suffered catastrophic losses. So the question becomes unavoidable, hanging in the air like a blade. If the Imperium needed to rebuild, if they needed to create new chapters to guard a galaxy still reeling from civil war, and if the pure gene seed reserves were not enough, what would they do? Would they simply accept weakness? Would they leave worlds undefended, sectors unguarded, because their principles demanded purity above all else? Or would they use what was available? The Carcharodons space sharks. They arrive from the void like something out of ancient nightmare, their gray armor marked with tribal patterns and savage iconography. They speak in an archaic dialect of High Gothic, as if they've been asleep for 10,000 years and just woken up. Their tactics are brutal beyond measure. They don't just kill the enemy, they utterly annihilate them, taking gene seed and equipment as tithes, as if they're desperately trying to sustain themselves from the very bodies of the fallen. The Imperium calls them loyalists. Rogue traitors who encounter them aren't so sure. Their pale skin, their black eyes, their preference for lightning warfare and sudden overwhelming violence. Some scholars look at these warriors and see shadows of the Night Lords, the 8th Legion, Conrad Kersey's sons who fell to madness and terror tactics. But the Carcharodons have no records of their founding. Their history begins in darkness, and darkness is where they prefer to operate. The Blood Ravens, beloved by some, suspected by many. A chapter with no known founding, no clear primarch, no genetic lineage that anyone will publicly acknowledge. They're scholars, collectors of ancient knowledge, obsessed with recovering lost relics and forbidden texts. Their librarians are unusually powerful, their psychers more numerous than in almost any other chapter. And they suffer from unique mutations, visions, and prophetic dreams that plague their battle brothers. The Imperium says they're descended from one of the Loyalist legions, probably Gilliman's line, but whispers persist. Whispers about the 1,000 Sons, Magnus the Red's legion of sorcerers who fell to Tzeentch, about how the Blood Raven's hunger for knowledge mirrors the doomed quest that destroyed Prospero. about how their gene seed bears markers that don't quite match any known loyalist strain. Then there are the others. The Minotaurs, who serve the High Lords with unsettling loyalty, who turn their weapons on other Space Marines without hesitation, who fight with a coordinated brutality that seems impossible without iron discipline drilled into their very genetics. Some see the ghost of the Iron Warriors in their tactics. The sons of Antaeus, impossibly resilient, their bodies resistant to damage in ways that suggest biological engineering that goes beyond normal gene seed enhancements. The Red Scorpions, fanatically devoted to genetic purity, perhaps because they're desperately trying to prove something, to distance themselves from a lineage they dare not acknowledge. The Imperium has founded over 1,000 Space Marine chapters. The records are incomplete, deliberately obscured, filled with gaps and contradictions. Whole foundings have classification levels that make even inquisitors pause. The 21st founding, called the Cursed Founding, resulted in chapters with such severe mutations and genetic instability that many were destroyed or declared renegade within centuries. What were they experimenting with? What gene seed were they using? The Mechanicus won't say, the High Lords won't say. But the evidence is there, in the screaming of cursed battle brothers, in the twisted flesh of Space Marines whose bodies reject their own enhancements. And beneath it all, a simple truth that the Imperium cannot escape. Gene seed is not ideology, it's biology. The same genetic template that made Guilliman a master strategist didn't care about the Codex Astartes. The same enhancements that made the Alpha Legion perfect infiltrators didn't ask questions about loyalty before they worked. If you took gene seed from a traitor legion, if you implanted it in a new recruit raised on Imperial doctrine, trained in loyalty, knowing nothing of their dark lineage, what would you get? A traitor? Or a warrior who carries the strengths of the damned without their weaknesses, without their corruption? It's a question the Imperium may have already answered. In secret, in darkness, in the hidden laboratories where new chapters are born and the line between pragmatism and heresy becomes impossible to see. Because in a galaxy where humanity fights for survival against impossible odds, where every world is precious and every warrior matters, the Imperium has never been above doing what must be done. They've burned planets to save them. They've sacrificed billions to protect trillions. They've made deals with Xenos, tolerated mutants, weaponized things that should never be touched. Would they use traitor gene seed if it meant survival? The sealed chamber on Terra remains silent. The three figures continue their discussion. Outside, across the galaxy, chapters bearing suspicious lineages fight and die in the Emperor's name, never knowing the truth of their own blood. And somewhere, in the darkest archives of the Inquisition, there are records that will never see light. Records of foundings that never officially happened. Of gene seed sources that cannot be named. Of chapters whose very existence is an admission of something the Imperium can never acknowledge. The question isn't whether these chapters exist. In the grim darkness of the far future, where humanity clings to survival by its fingernails, the question is far more terrifying. How many are there? How many chapters carry the legacy of traitors, fighting for an Imperium that would execute them all if the truth emerged? And most chilling of all, what happens when they find out? The answer comes not in declaration, but in blood. On the world of Badab, in the Maelstrom Zone, a chapter went rogue. The Astral Claws, led by their master Lufthurin, declared independence from the Imperium, and for years they held entire sectors hostage. It took a coalition of loyalist chapters to bring them down, and the war was brutal beyond measure. But here's what the official records skip over, what they gloss over in their sanitized accounts of the conflict. When the Astral Claws finally fell, when their fortress monastery was breached and their gene seed examined, the Mechanicus found anomalies. Markers in the genetic code that didn't match their supposed lineage. Traits that suggested something else, something older, something that traced back to legions that should have been extinct. The Inquisition sealed those findings, classified them at levels that require 3 different authorizations just to acknowledge they exist. Because if the astral claws weren't who they claimed to be, how many others were living the same lie? Gene seed tells stories that words cannot hide. Every Astartes carries within him a genetic legacy written in sequences of DNA that are part human, part something transcendent, something the Emperor crafted in his laboratories beneath the Himalayan peaks. When a space marine falls, his progenoid glands are harvested, and from those glands, new gene seed is cultivated to create the next generation. It's a sacred chain, unbroken for 10,000 years, connecting every battle brother to his primarch, to the demigod who is both father and template. But gene seed mutates, it drifts. Over centuries and millennia, small changes accumulate, scars written into the genetic code by radiation, by warp exposure, by the simple chaos of biology operating across incomprehensible spans of time. The Mechanicus tracks these mutations obsessively, cataloging every deviation, because those deviations are signatures, they're fingerprints. And sometimes, those fingerprints match patterns they shouldn't match. Patterns from the traitor legions. The soul drinkers learned their truth the hard way. For thousands of years, they believed themselves sons of Rogel Dorn, inheritors of the Imperial Fist's proud legacy. They fought with courage, with honor, defending the Imperium against threats that would have overwhelmed lesser warriors. Then they found an ancient facility, a forgotten laboratory from the dark age of the Horus Heresy, and inside they discovered records. Records that showed their gene seed had been tampered with, altered, that their lineage was not what they'd been told. The chapter fractured. Some refused to believe. Others embraced the revelation with religious fervor, claiming they were chosen for some greater purpose. But the Imperium's response was absolute. The soul drinkers were declared renegade, hunted across the stars, and ultimately destroyed. Not for any crime they'd committed, but for the truth they discovered. For knowing what they were never meant to know. Because the Imperium's greatest weapon is certainty. A space marine who knows his lineage, who takes pride in his primarch's legacy, will die for the Emperor without question. He'll charge into impossible odds because he believes in the purity of his purpose, in the righteousness of his cause. But introduce doubt, whisper that his genetic father might have been a traitor, and watch what happens. Watch how certainty crumbles. How brotherhood becomes suspicion. How a chapter can tear itself apart from within. No enemy required. This is why the secrets are kept. Not out of shame, though there is shame aplenty, but out of necessity. Because the Imperium cannot afford for its defenders to hesitate, not even for a second, not when the galaxy is filled with horrors that would exploit that moment of weakness. Yet there are those who've made peace with their shadows. The Silver Skulls practice divination, consulting their prognosticators before every battle, reading omens in ways that border on sorcery. Their methods are tolerated because they're effective, because the chapter has served loyally for millennia. But their practices echo the Thousand Sons, the legion of psychic warriors who fell because they believed knowledge was worth any price. The Death Spectres maintain death cults, perform rituals over the fallen, commune with spirits in ways that make other chapters uncomfortable. Are they descended from loyal stock who simply developed unusual traditions? Or do they carry the gene seed of the word bearers, the 17th Legion who turned the Imperium's faith into a weapon of chaos? No one asks these questions officially. But in the quiet moments, in the spaces between battles, other chapters wonder. They watch. They remember. The most damning evidence comes from the cursed founding itself. In the 36th millennium, the Mechanicus launched what they called the 21st Founding, an attempt to improve the Astartes, to engineer better warriors through genetic manipulation. Dozens of chapters were created, and almost all of them were disasters. The Flame Falcons burst into living fire during battle, their own bodies consuming them. The Black Dragons grew bone blades from their bodies, mutations that should have been impossible. The Lamenters suffered catastrophic luck, losing brothers at rates that defied probability. These weren't random failures. They were the results of experimentation, of Mechanicus genitors pushing boundaries, trying to recapture something to recreate advantages they'd seen before in traitor legions, in the genetic templates of Primarchs who'd fallen to chaos, but whose biological gifts remained undeniable. Think about what the word bearers could do before they fell. Their faith, twisted as it became, gave them unity of purpose that made them nearly unstoppable when committed to a cause. The Night Lords struck terror so profound that worlds would surrender at the mere rumor of their approach. The Iron Warriors could break any siege, overcome any fortification, through sheer bloody-minded determination. The Alpha Legion could infiltrate anywhere, become anyone, executing plans of such complexity that even their enemies couldn't comprehend them until it was too late. These weren't weaknesses, these were strengths. And if you're the Imperium, if you're struggling to defend 1,000,000 worlds with insufficient resources, you look at those strengths and you ask yourself the forbidden question: can we use this? Can we take the gifts without the corruption? Can we create Space Marines with the terror tactics of the 8th Legion, but the loyalty of the Imperial Fists? Warriors with the regeneration of the Death Guard, but without Nurgle's rot? The cursed founding suggests someone tried. And based on how violently the Inquisition suppresses information about it, someone may have partially succeeded. There's a chapter called The Marines Malevolent. They're despised by other Astartes, considered barely better than renegades despite their nominal loyalty. They show callous disregard for civilian casualties, employ brutal tactics that other chapters refuse, and seem to take genuine pleasure in inflicting suffering. They're descended from the Imperial Fists, according to official records. But their behavior mirrors the worst aspects of the Iron Warriors, the 4th Legion who turned bitterness and spite into an art form. Are the Marines malevolent naturally cruel? Or are they expressing genetics that remember the Siege of Terra from the wrong side? No one can say. Or more accurately, those who could say won't. The hardest truth is this: it might not even matter. A Space Marine's loyalty isn't determined solely by his gene seed. It's forged through decades of hypno-indoctrination, through the brutal training of the scout companies, through the brotherhood of the chapter and the faith instilled by chaplains who shape young minds before the implants are even complete. A boy taken from a death world at age 10, raised to worship the Emperor, trained to see the Imperium as humanity's only hope, implanted with gene seed that might trace back to a traitor Primarch he's never heard of. That boy becomes a weapon aimed at the Imperium's enemies. He doesn't care about genetics. He cares about his brothers beside him, about the oaths he's sworn, about proving himself worthy of the armor he wears. His gene seed gives him abilities, but his training gives him purpose. And purpose, in the end, matters more than blood. But there are exceptions. There are moments when the genetic legacy rises up, when traits thought buried in DN suddenly express themselves in ways that cannot be ignored. A battle brother of the Blood Ravens dreams of burning towers and forbidden knowledge, and he knows somehow that he's remembering something that happened before he was born, before his chapter even existed. A Carcharodon feels the pull of darkness, the desire not just to defeat the enemy, but to make them suffer, to teach them the meaning of fear. These moments pass. The warrior suppresses them, attributes them to stress or exhaustion, but they leave marks. They plant seeds of doubt that can never be fully uprooted. And if those warriors ever learned the truth, if they discovered that their dreams and urges weren't random but genetic echoes of traitor Primarchs, what then? Would they remain loyal? Or would they wonder if their entire existence was built on lies? In the depths of a Forge world, Imago studies gene seed samples that officially don't exist. She spent 3 centuries on this project, comparing markers, tracking mutations, building family trees of genetic descent that no one else is allowed to see, and what she's found terrifies her. Not because traitor gene seed was used. She suspected that from the beginning, but because of how often it was used, how many chapters bear the mark, how thoroughly the Imperium has woven its defenders from the genetics of the damned. She's found patterns that suggest deliberate selection, chapters given traits from specific traitor legions based on the enemies they'd face, the regions they'd patrol. She's uncovered evidence of a grand design, a calculated gamble taken by authorities who believed they could control the legacy of traitors through indoctrination and faith. And the worst part, the revelation that keeps her awake during charging cycles, is that it's working. These chapters fight. They die. They remain loyal despite carrying genetics that should doom them. Which means the Imperium was right. Which means the end justifies the means. Which means everything she was taught about purity and sanctity was negotiable all along. She seals her findings, submits her report to superiors who will read it once and then ensure it never surfaces again. Because some truths are too dangerous to acknowledge, even when they're already known. The chapter master stands alone in his sanctum, a chamber carved from meteor-born stone that predates the Imperium itself. His name is Tiberos, though few outside his chapter speak it aloud. The Red Wake, commander of the Carcharodons. Around his neck hangs a chain of ancient teeth, trophies from creatures that died screaming in the void between stars. His armor, massive even by Astartes standards, bears marks of battle so old they've become part of the metal itself. Scratches that remember conflicts from before the current Imperium's calendar began. He's reviewing tithe records, calculating what his chapter needs to survive another century of void warfare when the astropathic message arrives. It's not words. Words would be too dangerous, too easily intercepted. Instead, it's a sequence of images, psychic impressions that burn themselves into his mind. A laboratory, gene seeds suspended in stasis. And a face he's only seen in Forbidden's pick captures, angular and cruel, with eyes that reflect no light. Conrad Kurz, the Night Hunter, his genetic father. The Primarch whose legacy he spent centuries trying to outrun. Tiberos doesn't rage. Rage is a luxury for those who can afford revelation. Instead, he sits in perfect stillness, the kind of predatory calm that comes before violence. The message wasn't random. Someone knows, someone has proof. And they've chosen to share it with him, which means they want something. He traces one scarred finger across the teeth on his chain. Each one represents a compromise, a moment when his chapter did what was necessary rather than what was righteous. They operate in the darkness beyond Imperial space, taking tithe from defeated enemies, harvesting gene seed from sources other chapters wouldn't touch. They've always been different, always been separate, and now he understands why. The Imperium created them to be monsters fighting for humanity instead of against it. They gave them the Night Lord's capacity for terror and violence, pointed them at the galaxy's edge, and prayed the indoctrination would hold. For 10,000 years, it has. But knowledge changes everything. Tiberos can feel it already, the shift in how he perceives his own nature. Every instinct he's suppressed, every dark urge he's attributed to the stress of command, suddenly has context, has meaning, has a source that traces back to a traitor whose crimes shattered the Imperium. He burns the message. Physically impossible, burning a psychic transmission, but he tries anyway, focusing his will on erasing the memory from his mind. It doesn't work. Some truths, once known, become permanent. 300 light years away, in the fortress monastery of the Blood Ravens, Chief Librarian Jonah Orion experiences a vision that shouldn't be possible. He's in a library that stretches beyond sight, shelves climbing toward infinity, and he knows this place. Knows it like he knows his own heartbeat. The Tower of the Cyclops, Prospero, home of the Thousand. Sons before the Imperium burned it to ash and declared them heretics for crimes they hadn't yet committed. In the vision, he's walking through corridors lined with texts written in languages that predate human civilization, and he understands them all. Every word. Every symbol. As if the knowledge was always inside him, dormant, waiting for permission to surface. He reaches for a tome, leather-bound, and emanating psychic energy so powerful it should kill him to touch it. The moment his fingers brush the cover, he sees the face of Magnus the Red, the Crimson King, the 15th Primarch who defied the Emperor's decree and doomed his legion through pride and desperation. Magnus looks at him with an eye that contains entire galaxies, and he speaks a single word: son. Orion wakes screaming, psychic lightning arcing from his body, setting fire to tapestries that have hung in his chamber for centuries. 3 blood ravens burst through the door, weapons drawn, expecting an attack. Instead, they find their chief librarian on his knees, weeping like a child who's just learned his father is a murderer. He can't explain, can't tell them what he's seen. But the vision has changed him, and they can see it in his eyes. See the knowledge burning there, forbidden and complete. One of them, a sergeant named Thule, helps him to his feet and asks no questions. That's the blood raven's way. They collect secrets, hoard them like treasure, and they've learned not to pry into truths that might unravel them all. But Orion knows his time is limited. You can't carry knowledge like this without it consuming you. The Imperium will notice. The Inquisition has eyes everywhere, and a librarian experiencing visions of traitor primarchs is exactly the kind of contamination they're trained to purge. He has weeks, maybe days, before someone decides he's too dangerous to live. The pattern is repeating across the galaxy, though no single authority connects the incidents yet. A captain of the Minotaurs finds himself executing tactics he's never learned. Siege warfare strategies of such brutal efficiency that they can only have come from one source: the Iron Warriors. The gene memory rising up through generations, teaching him through instinct what should have required decades of study. A tech marine of the Sons of Antaeus discovers biological enhancements in his own body that don't match any standard. Astartes' template, resilience and regeneration that mirror the Death Guard before they fell to Nurgle's embrace. These revelations don't come with explanations or context. They simply emerge, like genetic time bombs finally reaching their detonation point. And the warriors who experience them face an impossible choice: report the anomaly and risk being declared tainted, or bury it deep and live with the knowledge that they might be carrying something corrupt, something that could spread. But there's another possibility, one that the Imperium has considered and fears more than any other. What if the traitor primarchs planned this? What if, in the final moments before their legions fell completely to chaos, some of them preserved samples of their gene seed, scattered it across the galaxy, seeded it into the Imperium's own infrastructure? Not as a weapon to corrupt, but as insurance. As a way to ensure their legacy survived, even if their legions were destroyed. The Alpha Legion would have thought of it. They thought of everything, planned for contingencies that wouldn't unfold for millennia. Alphereus and Omegan, the twin primarchs whose loyalty was always questionable, whose ultimate goals remain unknown even now. If they wanted to place sleeper agents throughout the Imperium, warriors who didn't even know they were agents, what better way than to contaminate the gene seed reserves themselves? Create chapters that serve loyally for thousands of years, gaining trust and authority, and then, at the precise moment when the Imperium needs them most, activate whatever was sleeping in their genetics. Turn the Imperium's defenders into its destroyers with a single psychic trigger. The Inquisition has hunted for evidence of this scenario for millennia. They found nothing conclusive. But absence of proof isn't proof of absence, and the possibility haunts them. Every chapter with suspicious lineage becomes a potential threat. Every genetic anomaly could be the first sign of activation. This is why they're so quick to declare chapters renegade, so willing to call down exterminatus on chapter homeworlds. Because if they're wrong, if the chapter really is loyal, then it's merely a tragedy. But if they're right, if they let a compromised chapter survive, the damage could dwarf the Horus Heresy itself. In a sealed meeting chamber on a world whose name has been expunged from all records, representatives of 6 different chapters gather. This shouldn't be possible. Chapter masters don't coordinate outside official Imperium channels. They don't hold secret councils. But these 6 have all received the same message, the same psychic transmission showing them their true lineage. The Carcharodons, the Blood Ravens, the Minotaurs, the Sons of Antaeus, the Silver Skulls, the Death Spectres. 6 chapters. 6 different suspected origins, all traitor legions. They sit in silence, each one processing the revelation. understanding that this meeting is itself an act of treason. If the Inquisition discovered them here, there would be no trial, no questions, just virus bombs and censure. But they have to know, have to understand what's happening. Whether this revelation is accident or design, natural mutation or deliberate awakening. Tibero speaks first, his voice like grinding stone. He tells them what his chapter has always suspected, what they've tried to deny. That their tactics, their instincts, their very nature echoes the Night Lord's too perfectly to be coincidence. Orion follows, describing his visions, the library on Prospero, Magnus himself claiming paternity. One by one, they confess. Not with shame, but with the cold pragmatism of warriors who've seen too much to be shocked by revelations of genetic impurity. The question they must answer is simple. What now? They've served loyally, fought the Imperium's wars, died in its defense, shed blood on 1,000 worlds. Does genetic legacy erase all of that? Do they become traitors simply by knowing what they are? Or is there a third path, a way to continue serving despite the revelation, to prove that they are more than the sum of their genetics? The Silver Skull's representative, a prognosticator named Anzer, performs a divination. He casts runes made from the bones of an alien prophet, reads patterns in their fall that would take hours to interpret fully. But his conclusion is immediate and terrifying. This revelation wasn't accidental. Someone wanted them to know. Someone with power enough to access the deepest genetic records, with reach enough to contact chapters scattered across the galaxy simultaneously. And whoever it was, they're not finished. This is the beginning of something, not the end. The first move in a game whose rules they don't understand and whose stakes might be the Imperium itself. They make a pact, these 6 chapter masters. They'll watch for further signs, monitor their own warriors for any indication of genetic corruption or psychic manipulation. And if they find evidence that their lineage is being weaponized, that someone intends to use their tainted heritage against the Imperium, they'll do what they've always done. They'll fight, even if it means fighting themselves, even if it means destroying their own chapters to prevent the Imperium's fall. Because whatever else they are, whatever genetics they carry, they are Space Marines. And Space Marines do not surrender to darkness, no matter where that darkness originates. As the meeting dissolves, as the chapter masters return to their ships and scatter back across the stars, none of them notice the figure watching from the shadows of the chamber. Watching with interest, with satisfaction, taking notes on their reactions, measuring their resolve, calculating how they might be used. The figure bears no insignia, no chapter markings, but the pattern of scars on his armor tells a story to those who know how to read it. The Alpha Legion's sign, the Hydra. And he's smiling, because everything is proceeding exactly as planned. The revelation was the test. The gathering was the confirmation. And now, after 10,000 years of patience, the real work can begin. The Alpha Legion operative doesn't report his findings immediately. That would be crude, wasteful of an opportunity, 10 millennia in the making. Instead, he waits, watches. The beauty of the Alpha Legion strategy has always been patience married to precision. While other traitor legions rage in the warp or launch futile attacks against Imperial worlds, the 20th Legion plays a longer game. They understand that the Imperium's greatest vulnerability isn't its armies or its faith, but its secrets. The lies it tells itself to maintain cohesion. And now, 6 chapter masters carry a secret that could shatter them. Not the secret of their lineage, that was always there, dormant and unproven, but the secret of their meeting. The fact that they gathered in darkness to discuss their tainted blood makes them conspirators, makes them exactly what the Inquisition fears most. Space Marines operating outside Imperial authority, bound by oaths spoken in shadow. 3 weeks after the meeting, the first incident occurs. A Minotaurs strike force engages Wordbearer's cultists on a shrine world in the Ultima Segmentum. It should be a straightforward cleansing operation. The cultists are disorganized, poorly armed, more fanatics than warriors. But when the Minotaurs breach the temple complex, when they come face to face with the cultists' leader, something happens. The Dark Apostle looks at them and laughs, not with mockery, but recognition. He speaks in a language the Minotaurs shouldn't understand, Old Colchisian, the tongue of Logar's homeworld. And somehow, impossibly, they do understand. Every word registers not as translation, but as native comprehension, as if they've always known this language, as if it was coded into their genetic memory, waiting for activation. The Dark Apostle tells them they're brothers, that the blood of Lorgar flows in them just as it flows in the word-bearers, that the only difference between loyalist and traitor is which lies they've chosen to believe. The Minotaurs kill him, purge the temple with flamer and bolter until nothing remains but ash and silence. But the encounter spreads through the strike force like poison. Battle brothers who fought together for decades suddenly look at each other differently. Is it true? Could they really carry the gene seed of the arch-traitor, the primarch who orchestrated the Emperor's fall? Their captain, a veteran of 3 centuries of warfare, makes a decision. He orders the strike force to maintain silence about the incident. No reports, no official record. Just a standard mission result submitted to chapter command. It's a small betrayal, barely worth mentioning. But it's the first step down a path that leads only to damnation. Because once you start hiding the truth from the Imperium, once you decide that some knowledge is too dangerous to share, you've already separated yourself from the very authority you claim to serve. Aboard the Blood Raven's battle barge Litany of Fury, Chief Librarian Orion discovers something that makes the Dark Apostle's revelation seem merciful by comparison. He's searching through the chapter's archives, ancient texts and recovered relics that span thousands of years, looking for any mention of their founding, any clue to their true origins. The Blood Ravens have always been obsessive collectors, gathering forbidden knowledge from across the galaxy, and their libraries contain works that would make the Inquisition weep with horror if they knew they existed. Deep in the restricted sections, sealed behind wards that require 3 senior librarians to bypass, Orion finds a journal. It's written in High Gothic but laced with psychic encryption, words that shift and change as you read them, revealing different meanings based on the reader's mental state. The author identifies himself only as a Corvidae, a member of the Thousand Suns divination cult. And he writes about the final days on Prospero, when the Space Wolves came to burn their world and Magnus refused to fight back, accepting the Imperium's judgment even as it destroyed everything they built. But this Corvidae didn't accept it. He saw what was coming, the centuries of damnation that would follow Magnus's fall to chaos, and he made a choice. He took samples of gene seed, pure samples from before the corruption, before Tzeentch claimed the Thousand Suns as his own. He scattered them across the galaxy, hidden in places the Imperium would eventually find and utilize, knowing that desperate authorities would use any resource available. A genetic legacy preserved not for conquest, but for redemption. A chance for the Thousand Suns' gifts, their psychic mastery and thirst for knowledge, to serve humanity again. The final entry in the journal is a list of coordinates, places where the gene seed was hidden. And one of those coordinates matches the location where the Blood Ravens' founding chapter established their first fortress monastery. Orion sits in the archive chamber for 6 hours without moving. The revelation is almost too perfect, too neat. It gives him everything he wanted. Confirmation of lineage and proof of innocent origins. They aren't tainted, they're redeemed. The Thousand Suns' better nature preserved in new form. But he's a librarian trained to see beyond surface truths, and something about the journal troubles him. The psychic encryption is too sophisticated, the preservation too perfect. This journal survived 10,000 years without degradation, without corruption, and was conveniently placed where the Blood Ravens would eventually find it. Almost as if someone wanted them to find it. Wanted them to believe this story, which means it might be bait. A lie designed to make them comfortable with their heritage, to lower their guard against whatever's really sleeping in their genetics. He burns the journal, uses psychic fire that erases not just the physical book, but the psychic imprint it left on reality. Then he reports finding nothing in the archives, maintaining the chapter's foundational mystery, because he realizes now that the truth, whatever it is, might be less dangerous than false certainty. Better to remain unknown than to believe a comfortable lie. The Carcharodons receive no revelations, no helpful journals or dramatic encounters, just a steady increase in violence among their ranks. Battle brothers attacking each other over minor disputes, training exercises that leave warriors crippled or dead, an erosion of discipline that terrifies their officers because the Carcharodons have always been controlled, always channeled their violent instincts toward the enemy. Taberos watches his chapter begin to fracture and understands what's happening. The knowledge of their lineage, even unspoken, is changing them. It's giving permission to urges they've always suppressed. If we carry the Night Lord's gene seed, some part of them whispers, perhaps we should embrace it. Perhaps the Imperium's leash has been holding us back from our true potential. He calls a chapter gathering, assembles every battle brother not on active deployment, and makes them kneel in the vast cathedral bay of their flagship. Then he tells them a story about monsters, about warriors who became so consumed by what they were capable of that they forgot why they were fighting. The Night Lords fell because they believed strength justified everything, because they confused cruelty with effectiveness and terror with justice. The Carcharodons have the capacity for the same darkness, he tells them. But capacity is not destiny. They choose, every day, every battle, to be something better, to use their gifts for humanity's protection rather than its destruction. And if any among them can't make that choice, can't resist the pull toward darkness, then they should speak now, because he'll grant them the Emperor's peace personally rather than let them become what their genetic fathers became. No one speaks, but in the silence, Taberos sees something that chills him more than any confession would. He sees doubt, sees battle brothers questioning not their loyalty, but their capability for loyalty, wondering if the choice he's offering is real or just illusion, if genetics might ultimately override willpower. The revelation hasn't corrupted them. It's done something worse. It's made them uncertain. On a world at the galaxy's edge, an inquisitor named Helena Valeria reviews reports that make no sense in isolation, but form a disturbing pattern when compiled. 6 different Space Marine chapters, all with questionable founding records, all experiencing unusual incidents within weeks of each other. Genetic revelations, behavioral changes, classified communications between chapter masters who should have no contact with each other. She's hunted heretics for 60 years, developed instincts that detect corruption long before evidence proves it, and every one of those instincts is screaming that something is happening, something coordinated. She has the authority to investigate, to demand answers from the chapters involved. But she also has the wisdom to understand that investigating Space Marines is how Inquisitors die. Chapters have killed her kind before for pressing too hard, asking questions that cut too close to secrets they need to keep buried. And these chapters, if they're working together, if they form some kind of alliance, could wipe out her entire conclave without breaking stride. She makes a decision that violates every principle she's built her career on. She waits, gathers more information, tries to understand the scope of what she's facing before committing to action. It's the smart choice, the tactical choice. But it's also the choice that will haunt her for whatever time she has left. Because somewhere in the shadows between her reports, the real threat continues to grow. The Alpha Legion operative finally makes his move. He doesn't contact the chapters directly. That would reveal his hand too early. Instead, he begins spreading rumors through channels the Inquisition monitors. Whispers about Traitor gene seed being used in Loyalist chapters. About Space Marines descended from heretics. He feeds them just enough truth to make them investigate, just enough misdirection to ensure they focus on the wrong targets. Because the Alpha Legion's goal was never to corrupt these chapters or turn them against the Imperium. Their goal was simpler and far more devastating. They wanted to make the Imperium destroy its own defenders, to force the Inquisition to purge loyal chapters based on genetic evidence, creating martyrs and breeding grounds for actual rebellion. The 6 chapter masters think they're the pawns in this game. They're not. They're the sacrifice. The opening move that forces every other piece into motion. And in the warp, something ancient stirs. The traitor primarchs, those who survive and those who've transcended into daemonhood, sense what's happening. They feel their genetic legacy awakening in warriors who've never known their true fathers. Logar watches from his cathedral in the warp. Magnus observes from his tower of sorcery. Perturabo calculates from his fortress of iron. They don't intervene, don't need to. Because the Imperium will do their work for them. Will tear itself apart trying to maintain purity that never truly existed. The final victory of the Horus Heresy won't be military. It will be the moment when the Imperium realizes that the line between loyal and traitor, between pure and corrupted, was always an illusion. That they've been fighting with weapons forged from the very forces they swore to destroy. And when that realization comes, when the Imperium's foundational certainties crumble, the galaxy will finally understand what chaos has always known. There's no purity. There is no absolute loyalty. There is only the long game, playing out across millennia, where every choice leads deeper into shadow. Tiberos receives a final message. This one isn't psychic. It's a simple data packet delivered through standard Astartes channels, encoded but not suspicious. Inside is a single piece of information, the coordinates for a meeting. Not between chapter masters this time. Between them and someone who claims to have proof of everything. Proof of the conspiracy, the genetic manipulation, the true scope of what was done to them. The message doesn't say who this someone is, or why they're revealing themselves now. Just coordinates and a date 3 months hence. Tiberos knows it's a trap. Knows that attending means confirming everything the Inquisition suspects, giving them justification for the purge they're probably already planning. But he also knows he has no choice. Because after everything that's happened, after all the revelations and doubts, he needs to understand. Needs to know who did this to them and why. Needs to look his creators in the eye and ask them if they realized what they were unleashing, or if humanity's survival was always worth this price. He sets course for the coordinates. Behind him, 5 other strike forces do the same, converging from across the galaxy toward a meeting that will change everything. The coordinates lead to a dead system. No planets, just asteroid debris and radiation that would kill unprotected humans in seconds. The 6 strike forces arrive within hours of each other, ships translating from the warp into real space with calculated precision. They maintain weapons distance, each chapter master trusting the others just enough to not open fire immediately, but not enough to drop their void shields. In the center of the debris field, a structure waits. Not Imperial architecture, older, much older. A facility that predates the Imperium itself, from the dark age of technology when humanity reached heights they would never achieve again. It's been preserved in stasis fields, protected from the entropy that claimed everything else in this system. And it's broadcasting a signal that matches Astartes' authorization codes from the Great Crusade era. Codes that should no longer exist. Tiberos goes first. His boarding party numbers 20 battle brothers, each one a veteran who survived decades in the void. They don't speak as they cross the emptiness between ship and station. Don't need to. They fought together long enough that words are unnecessary. The station's airlock accepts their entry codes without hesitation, and they step into corridors that haven't seen living souls in 10,000 years. The lighting activates automatically, revealing walls covered in records, gene sequencing data, Primarch genetic profiles, documentation of the original Space Marine creation process, information so classified that possessing it is grounds for execution. And at the center of it all, a chamber where the other chapter masters are already gathering, drawn by the same signal, following the same invisible thread to this moment. 6 warriors stand in a circle, each one a master of their chapter, each one carrying secrets that could doom them. The chamber is circular, its walls lined with stasis pods, and inside those pods are samples, gene seed, thousands upon thousands of viable samples, preserved in perfect condition, labeled with designations that make the chapter master's blood run cold. 4th Legion, 8th Legion, 12th Legion, 5th 10th Legion, 17th Legion, 20th Legion, every Traitor Legion represented. A genetic library of damnation, hidden away where the Imperium would never find it, maintained by automated systems that have operated flawlessly across millennia. A hololith activates. Not a recording, something more sophisticated. An artificial intelligence, ancient and patient, that has waited 10,000 years to deliver its message. The figure that appears is hooded, features obscured, but the voice is unmistakably human, cultured, tired beyond measure. It identifies itself as Astropath Prime Scylla, serving under the Emperor himself during the final days of the Great Crusade. And it tells them a story that rewrites everything they thought they knew. When the Horus Heresy erupted, when half the Primarchs turned traitor and the galaxy burned, the Emperor saw what was coming, not just the immediate war, but the long aftermath. He calculated that the Loyalist legions, even if they won, would be shattered, reduced to fractions of their former strength, insufficient to guard the Imperium that would need to be rebuilt. And he knew that gene seed reserves would be catastrophically depleted. The math was brutal and inescapable. The Imperium would need more Space Marines than Loyalist gene seed could provide. So he issued a secret order to a handful of trusted servants. Recover traitor gene seed from the battlefield. The pure samples taken from warriors before they fell to chaos. Preserve them, hide them. And when the time came, when the Imperium was desperate enough, use them. Not openly, never openly, but through carefully controlled chapter foundings, mixing traitor genetics with Loyalist indoctrination, creating weapons that combined the strengths of both sides without the weaknesses. The Emperor's plan. Not the Mechanicus experimenting without authorization. Not some inquisitorial conspiracy. The Emperor himself in the final days before the Siege of Terra, before Horus wounded him so gravely that he would spend eternity immobile on the Golden Throne, made the decision that humanity's survival was worth any compromise, any price. Even this. The chapter masters stand frozen, processing, trying to reconcile this revelation with everything they believe. If it's true, if the order came from the Emperor, then their existence isn't heresy. It's obedience to the highest authority. It's the fulfillment of his final command. But if it's a lie, if this ancient AI is corrupted or this entire station is an elaborate deception, then they're being manipulated into accepting their damnation, into believing their tainted nature is somehow sanctified. Orion speaks first, his voice carefully controlled. He asks the question they're all thinking. Proof. Where's the proof that this order came from the Emperor, and not from someone claiming to act in his name? The hololith responds by displaying authentication codes that predate the Imperium's founding. Gene sequence markers that match the Emperor's own genetic work. Documentation sealed with his personal cipher. Everything an Inquisitor would demand as evidence. Everything that could also be forged by sufficiently advanced technology and millennia of preparation. The AI continues. It explains that the Alpha Legion discovered this facility 3,000 years ago, that they've known about the Traitor Gene Seed program ever since. But they didn't destroy it or expose it. Instead, they've been using it, carefully, precisely, feeding information to the chapters involved, forcing revelations, orchestrating the current crisis. Because the Alpha Legion's ultimate loyalty was always unclear, their goals always obscured, and perhaps, just perhaps, they're still following their Primarch's final orders. Orders that might have involved exactly this scenario. Forcing the Imperium to confront its own compromises, making it choose between purity and survival. Tiberos moves to one of the stasis pods, looks at the gene seed inside, labeled with the 8th Legion's designation. His legion, his father's legacy. And he realizes something that makes him want to tear the facility apart with his bare hands. It doesn't matter if the Emperor ordered this or not. It doesn't matter if the plan was sanctified or heretical, because they've already been living it for thousands of years. The Blood Ravens have served with distinction. The Carcharodons have protected the Imperium's borders. The Minotaurs have executed the High Lord's will without question. They've been what the Imperium needed them to be, and their genetics, their tainted heritage, didn't make them traitors. It made them effective. Which means the compromise worked. Which means the Emperor, or whoever made this decision, was right. And that's the unforgivable part. Not that they were created from traitor stock, but that it was the correct decision. The chapter master of the Silver Skulls, Anzer, performs one final divination. His hands shake as he casts the bones, reads the patterns that emerge. And what he sees makes him laugh, bitter and broken. He tells them the truth he's just witnessed. This meeting, this revelation, it's the test. The Alpha Legion, or the Emperor's servants, or whoever orchestrated this, they needed to know if chapters created from traitor gene seed could be trusted with the truth of their origins. If they would remain loyal even after learning what they are. This entire crisis, from the first psychic message to the gathering in this ancient station, it's been an evaluation. And they're being watched right now, measured, judged based on their reaction. The walls shimmer. Figures materialize, not physically present, but projected through technology that makes them seem solid. Inquisitors, High Lords, representatives of the Mechanicus. The Imperium's true power structure, or at least a fragment of it, the secret councils that make decisions too terrible to acknowledge. They've been observing the entire meeting through hidden systems, recording every word. And their spokesman, an Inquisitor whose face is hidden behind a featureless mask, speaks with authority that brooks no argument. They know everything, have always known. The Traitor Gene Seed program has been running for 10,000 years under their supervision. Hundreds of chapters created using genetics that should have been destroyed, and it's worked. The Imperium has survived threats that would have overwhelmed it with loyalist Marines alone. But the system only functions if the chapters involved never learn the truth. Because knowledge changes everything. Certainty becomes doubt. Loyalty becomes question. Which is why the chapters represented here, all 6 of them, are being given a choice. Accept the truth and be destroyed. Their gene seed finally purged from the Imperium's reserves, and their chapters written from history as regrettable necessities. Or forget, submit to psychic redaction, have the memories of this meeting erased, return to their ships believing they attended a routine tactical briefing, continue serving the Imperium in ignorance, the way they have for millennia, and let the secret remain buried for another 10,000 years. Silence holds the chamber like a physical force. The choice is impossible. Accept damnation for the crime of knowing, or surrender the truth and live as unknowing tools. Neither option offers dignity. Neither allows them to remain who they are. The Inquisitor allows them 5 minutes to decide. 5 minutes to determine not just their fates, but the fate of every battle brother who serves under them, every aspirant waiting to receive their gene seed, every future generation that might be created or erased based on this moment. Tiberos looks at the other chapter masters, sees the same calculation in their eyes, the same brutal pragmatism that has kept their chapters alive through centuries of war. And he knows, before any of them speak, what the decision will be. Because they're Space Marines, created to sacrifice, built to endure the unendurable for humanity's sake. Their dignity, their certainty, their right to know what they are, these things are trivial compared to the mission, compared to the simple fact that the Imperium needs them, and the Imperium cannot need them if they know what they are. One by one, they kneel. Not in surrender, but in acceptance. They choose service over truth. Choose to let the memories be taken, to return to their chapters as they were, ignorant and effective. The greatest sacrifice they can make is giving up the revelation, surrendering the knowledge that would complete them but doom their purpose. The Inquisitor nods, satisfied. signals to librarians hidden in the shadows, powerful psychers who step forward with minds honed to surgical precision. The process will be painless, thorough. They'll remember coming to the coordinates. Remember finding the facility empty, abandoned, a dead end in their search for truth. They'll return to their chapters frustrated but unburdened. And the secret will remain safe for another generation. But before the psychic redaction begins, before the librarians can begin their work, Orion raises his head. He speaks a single sentence that stops everything. He tells them he's already copied every piece of data in this facility, downloaded it into his memory through psychic connection. And he's protected those memories with wards that will kill him if anyone tries to remove them. He's made himself a living repository of the truth, unkillable without destroying the very information the Inquisition wants to protect. And he has a counter-proposal. Let them keep the knowledge, all 6 chapters, but bind them with oaths that make their previous vows seem trivial. Swear them to secrecy absolute. Make them the guardians of their own secret, responsible for ensuring no one else discovers what they've learned. Turn them from potential threats into active participants in the conspiracy, giving them stake in maintaining the lie. Because warriors who know the truth and choose to bury it are more reliable than warriors who never knew it all. They'll police themselves, purge any brother who shows signs of corruption, guard their gene seed more carefully than any other chapters because they understand the stakes. They become the Imperium's darkest defenders, the ones who bear the weight of knowledge so others can remain pure. The Inquisitor considers, calculates, and slowly, inevitably agrees, because Orion's right, this is better. This creates a web of complicity that binds these chapters more tightly than ignorance ever could. They become prisoners of their own knowledge, unable to rebel without exposing themselves, unable to fall without destroying the very secret that defines them. It's elegant, cruel, perfectly imperial. The oaths are sworn, words spoken in the ancient chamber that will never be repeated, binding the chapter masters and through them, their entire chapters to silence eternal. They become the Imperium's shadow warriors, fighting not just its enemies, but the truth of their own existence. And when they leave the facility, when they return to their ships and scatter back across the galaxy, they carry a burden that will define them forever. They know what they are, know what compromises were made to create them, and they've chosen to protect that truth, to bury it so deep that not even their own brothers will suspect. The facility powers down behind them. The stasis pods remain undisturbed. The gene seed waits, preserved and pristine, ready for the next crisis when the Imperium will once again choose survival over purity. And somewhere in the void, the Alpha Legion operative watches them depart and smiles. Because whether they know it or not, whether the Emperor ordered it or it was all an elaborate deception, the outcome is the same. The Imperium has become exactly what it swore to fight against. Pragmatic, compromised, willing to use any weapon, bear any corruption, as long as it survives one more day. The chapter masters return to their wars. The Imperium continues its slow decay. And the secret remains safe, protected by those who have the most to lose if it emerges. The greatest victory chaos could achieve isn't converting the Imperium's defenders. It's making them complicit in their own damnation, making them choose the lie over the truth. And in that choice, in that moment of acceptance, they've already lost something more precious than loyalty. They've lost the certainty that they were ever pure at all. Years pass, decades, the galaxy continues its eternal grind, consuming lives and worlds in conflicts too numerous to count. And in the silence between battles, in the quiet moments when warriors remove their helmets and remember what it means to be human, the 6 chapter masters carry their burden. They don't speak of it, can't speak of it, but it shapes every decision they make, colors every order they give. They've become guardians of a truth that would destroy them, and in that guardianship, they found a purpose more profound than simple loyalty. They're not just defending the Imperium anymore. They're defending the compromise that allows the Imperium to survive. Tibero stands on the bridge of his flagship, watching a world burn below. The Carcharodons just finished a compliance action, brutal and efficient, exactly as the Imperium required. His warriors fought with controlled violence, channeling their darkness toward enemies who deserved no mercy. And he sees them differently now. Sees past the savage exterior to the discipline beneath. These are warriors who could have become monsters, who carry the genetic legacy of monsters. But they chose, every day, to be something else. To use their capacity for terror as a tool rather than an identity. The knowledge of their lineage didn't corrupt them. If anything, it made them more careful, more aware of the line they walk. They know what they could become if they let themselves slip. And that knowledge, that constant awareness of the abyss inside them, makes them stronger than chapters who never questioned their purity. He thinks about Conrad Kurz, the Night Haunter, a primarch who saw the worst of humanity and decided that humanity deserved nothing better, who turned justice into terror and law into nightmare. Kurz believed people were defined by their darkest impulses, that civilization was a thin veneer over inevitable savagery. And perhaps he was right about some. But the Carcharodons prove something else. They prove that impulses, even dark ones, are only potential. That warriors can carry the capacity for horror and still choose mercy. Can possess the skills for terror and use them only when necessary. Kurz fell because he believed his nature determined his fate. The Carcharodons endure because they refuse to accept that genetics are destiny. On the Blood Raven's fortress monastery, Orion walks through archives that have consumed his entire existence. He's added new sections since the revelation. Sealed vaults that contain everything he learned in that ancient facility. Documentation of the Emperor's final order. Proof of the Traitor gene seed program. Evidence that would trigger an inquisitorial purge if it ever surfaced. He's made himself the keeper of forbidden knowledge, and the irony isn't lost on him. If the Blood Ravens really do descend from the Thousand Suns, then he's fulfilling the same role Magnus did, collecting truth that others fear, preserving understanding that could enlighten or destroy. But there's a difference, one that matters more than lineage. Magnus believed knowledge justified any price. That understanding was worth betrayal, worth damnation, worth the destruction of everything he'd built. He broke the Emperor's decree because he was certain he knew better. The Blood Ravens learned from that mistake. They have knowledge now, perhaps the most dangerous knowledge in the Imperium, and they've chosen to bury it. To protect others from truths they can't handle, it's not ignorance. It's wisdom. Knowing when truth serves and when it only wounds. Magnus fell because he couldn't distinguish between knowledge and wisdom. The Blood Ravens survive because they've learned that some truths are too heavy for humanity to bear, and bearing them so others don't have to is the highest form of service. Orion thinks about his chapter's motto. Knowledge is power, guard it well. He always thought it meant hoarding information, collecting secrets as weapons. But now he understands it differently. Some knowledge must be guarded not to use, but to prevent its use. Protected not because it's valuable, but because it's dangerous. The Blood Ravens are guardians in the truest sense. They stand watch over truths that would shatter the Imperium, ensuring those truths stay buried. And if that means they never get recognition for their real service, if they have to live forever with questions about their founding that they could answer but won't, then that's the price they pay. That's the burden of being truly loyal. The other chapters continue their wars, each one adapting to the weight of revelation in their own way. The Minotaurs become even more rigid in their adherence to Imperial authority, overcompensating for suspected taint by being beyond reproach in their service. The sons of Antaeus monitor themselves for genetic deviation with obsessive care, purging any brother who shows signs of the mutations that might reveal their heritage. The Silver Skulls dive deeper into divination, seeking guidance from fate itself, because they can no longer trust their own instincts. The Death Spectres commune with their dead more frequently, as if the spirits of fallen brothers can absolve them of genetic sin. They're all trying in their own ways to prove something. Not to the Imperium, which will never know what they've sacrificed, but to themselves. To show that blood doesn't determine character, that the circumstances of creation matter less than the choices made afterward, that loyalty isn't inherited but earned through 10,000 small decisions to serve even when it costs everything. The Inquisition watches them still. Helena Valeria never stopped her investigation, though she never found concrete proof of what she suspected. She sees the subtle changes in these chapters, the increased secrecy, the careful monitoring of their own ranks. The way they seem to be carrying burdens heavier than warfare alone would explain. She could push harder, could demand answers with the full authority of her office. But she's learned, over decades of hunting heretics, that sometimes stability is worth more than truth. That the Imperium functions not because it's pure, but because people agree to maintain fictions that allow it to function. These chapters serve effectively. They haven't turned traitor, haven't shown corruption. If they're hiding something, if they're guarding secrets that would shake the Imperium's foundations, perhaps that's exactly what the Imperium needs. Warriors willing to bear damnation so others don't have to. She closes her investigation, files a report stating she found nothing actionable, and she sleeps better afterward because she's decided that some questions shouldn't be answered. That faith, even faith built on incomplete information, is sometimes stronger than knowledge. In the warp, the traitor primarchs observe their genetic descendants with emotions that might, in other beings, be called pride. Logar watches the chapters that might carry his gene seed and sees them struggling with the same questions he once faced, about faith and certainty, about whether the ends justify the means. He made his choice millennia ago, embracing chaos because he believed humanity needed gods to worship and the Emperor refused to be one. These new chapters face the inverse problem. They serve a god-emperor who never wanted godhood, maintaining a lie he might have created, faithful to a vision that may have always been compromised. Logar wonders if they'll eventually reach his conclusions, if the weight of hypocrisy will drive them to seek truth at any cost. But so far, they endure. They choose service over certainty, and perhaps that makes them stronger than he ever was. Magnus, if he could feel regret through his ascended state, might feel something close to it watching the blood ravens. They have the gifts he gave his sons, the psychic potential, the thirst for knowledge, the ability to see beyond the material into deeper truths. But they've learned restraint, learned when to stop searching, when to accept that some knowledge costs more than it's worth. He destroyed everything because he couldn't stop, couldn't accept limitations. His descendants survive because they've chosen boundaries. They've become what he should have been, seekers of wisdom rather than collectors of secrets. And the Imperium is better for their service, even if it never acknowledges what they truly are. The Alpha Legion operative, the one who orchestrated the revelations, submits his final report. The test was successful. The chapters exposed the truth of their origins remained loyal, chose to maintain the conspiracy, proved that warriors created from traitor stock can serve effectively if properly indoctrinated. His superiors are satisfied. The project can continue. More chapters founded, more traitor gene seed utilized. The Imperium's survival ensured through compromises it will never acknowledge. He feels no triumph, no satisfaction. Just the cold certainty that he's helped the Imperium become exactly what it swore to fight. A system that uses any means to survive. That sacrifices principles for pragmatism. That lies to itself about its own nature. But perhaps he thinks that's the only way anything survives in this galaxy. The Imperium that refuses to compromise, that clings to purity at all costs, would have fallen millennia ago. Only by becoming partially what it opposes, by incorporating the strengths of its enemies while resisting their weaknesses, has it endured. It's an ugly truth, an uncomfortable truth, but truth nonetheless. The question posed at the beginning, the one that hangs over this entire story, finally finds its answer. Not in declaration, but in demonstration. Can warriors carrying tainted blood defend humanity? The answer is yes. Not despite their origins, but perhaps because of them. Because they understand, more deeply than pure strain chapters ever could, what corruption looks like. What it feels like. How easily loyalty can twist into betrayal when certainty replaces doubt. They carry darkness inside them, genetic echoes of primarchs who fell to chaos, and that darkness makes them vigilant. Makes them question themselves constantly. Makes them work harder to prove they're more than their genetics would suggest. The Imperium survives not because it's pure, but because it's adaptive. Because it's willing to use any weapon, even weapons forged from its enemies, as long as those weapons remain pointed outward. The chapters descended from traitor legions are the ultimate expression of that pragmatism. They're proof that the Imperium will sacrifice even its founding principles if doing so means survival. And perhaps that's the real tragedy. Not that these chapters were created, but that creating them was the correct decision. That the Imperium works better with them than it would without them. That compromise in the end was stronger than purity. Tiberos, Orion, and the other chapter masters will carry their secret to their graves. Will pass it to their successors in sealed chambers where words are spoken once and never repeated. The burden will continue. The lie will persist. And the Imperium will endure, built partially on foundations of treachery, transformed into loyalty through nothing more miraculous than faith and discipline. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but there's also something else. Something the Imperium rarely acknowledges. There's choice. The choice to be more than your origins. The choice to serve even when service requires bearing truths that could destroy you. The choice to protect others from knowledge that would break them. These chapters, these warriors forged from traitor stock, make that choice every day. They could reveal the truth, could expose the Imperium's hypocrisy, could tear down the entire system in righteous fury at the lies they've been forced to embody. But they don't, because they understand something fundamental about duty. It isn't glorious. It isn't about recognition or reward. It's about doing what must be done, bearing what must be borne, so that others don't have to. It's about being strong enough to live with compromise so that those less strong can maintain their faith. It's about sacrifice that no one will ever acknowledge, service that no one will ever praise, loyalty that requires surrendering the very certainty that makes loyalty meaningful. So the chapters fight on, the galaxy burns, and in the shadows between stars, warriors who carry the blood of traitors prove, with every battle, with every oath kept, with every moment they choose duty over revelation, that what you are matters less than what you choose to become. That genetics are only potential waiting for choice to give them meaning. That the true measure of loyalty isn't never doubting, but continuing to serve even when doubt becomes certainty. Perhaps the Emperor knew this when he issued that final order. Perhaps he understood that humanity's survival would require compromises that would horrify those who believed in absolute purity. Or perhaps it was all an elaborate deception, a conspiracy by lesser authorities who used his name to justify the unjustifiable. In the end, it doesn't matter. The choice was made. The chapters were founded. And they serve, not because their origins are pure, but because they've decided that serving is more important than being pure. That's the real answer to the question. The warriors carrying tainted blood don't just defend humanity. They might defend it better than anyone else, because they know with absolute certainty that nobility isn't inherited, it's chosen. Every day, every battle, every moment you decide to be more than what you were created to be. And in a galaxy where darkness is the only certainty, where corruption waits in every shadow, that choice, repeated endlessly across centuries and millennia, might be the most powerful weapon humanity possesses. The lie continues, the secret endures, and the Imperium, built partially on foundations it can never acknowledge, survives one more day. Because sometimes, the greatest act of faith is choosing to believe in something, even after you've learned it was always a lie.